Now let's move on to another category, which is called as business methods. Now this is a very this is one of those subject matter requirements where lot of software inventions end up looking at challenges in terms of overcoming this kind of an objection, wherein we go ahead and apply for a patent, and the patent office comes back and says that what you are trying to protect is not a technology but a business method. Now the reason why I say this is extremely important is because this is actually very, very common. So most of the times what we end up seeing, if we look at it from an Indian context, so most of the times what you end up seeing is that there is some kind of a business method or a business proposition, so to say, which is then implemented by way of software technology. Now let's take a very broad example of cab aggregation. So you have the likes of Ola, Uber, so on and so forth, who are into the cab aggregation business. Now, at the outset, one needs to realize that there were companies that were doing cab aggregation before as well, and there have been companies that have been doing cab aggregation now, and then there'll be a lot more companies who will end up doing cab aggregation going forward as well. The reason why everybody is able to pretty much follow the same business model, so to say, is because business models or business methods just cannot be protected, right? So let's say, irrespective of how innovative your business idea could be, business idea by itself cannot be patented. So in this very specific example, let's say you are building a cab aggregation app, then the cab aggregation app by itself cannot be patented. On the other hand, let's say you have have built up a system, a pure software system, which probably takes real-time traffic conditions, driver availability, passenger demand patterns, so on and so forth, and essentially optimizes ride assignments and dynamically assigns routes, so on and so forth, right? So in this one, it is not the business method. Now we are speaking of very specific technology that takes in real-time data as input, multiple real-time data as input, and then eventually comes up with an output, which could be in terms of optimizing routes, optimizing allocations, so on and so forth. So something like this now becomes patentable, right? So many a times what we look at is, if there is a business method, irrespective of how innovative that business method is, now the underlying technology, whether one had to make changes to that underlying technology to enable this whole new business method, and whether that underlying changes that have been done to that underlying technology by itself is innovative or not, right? So the key learning here is that business models, irrespective of how innovative a business model is, cannot be patented, but the underlying technology can be patented. So in terms of from a more practical standpoint, for example, let's say both Ola also does cab aggregation, so does Uber, right? So the concept of cab aggregation cannot be protected by patent, but let's say the way driver assignment or the ride assignments or route dynamics, the underlying technology that is used by Ola as versus Uber could be patented, as long as there are two different ways, two different approaches of doing it. No matter how nuanced a difference that might be, as long as that nuanced difference is novel and not obvious, it can be protected. Now let's take yet another example of business methods. Now, customer relationship management softwares are fairly common, right? So there are so many different customer relationship management softwares. Essentially what these softwares end up doing is, essentially organizes and records, data with respect to customers, what are the different interactions with respect to those customers, the sales, revenues, where they are in the pipeline, so on and so forth, right? So this is again considered a business method, right? Because essentially you're just organizing data and then you are putting a flow to that particular, the whole business process as to, we start off with a particular prospective, and then that prospective, we contact them. When we contact them, they move to the next stage of a sales pipeline. And if they are still interested, they probably move to a further stage in a sales pipeline, so on and so forth. So this is all a typical business method, right? One CRM could have, let's say, 10 stages, another CRM could have 20 stages, so on and so forth. So irrespective of all of this, so this is essentially a business model or a business method that is essentially implemented by a software. Now, how, irrespective of how innovative this business flow could be, if there is no underlying technology that is innovative, that business model cannot be patented. On the other hand, let's say we have built up a CRM system which kind of analyzes historic customer data, social media interactions, real-time behavior patterns, and probably, let's say, it also takes as input natural language and does natural language processing of feedbacks and queries. And using all of these things, now the system is able to route customer queries to a particular department and generate some contextual responses by considering all of these things. Now, what we are talking about here is pure technology. Although it is now implemented in a CRM, right, which is a broad business concept, but there is an underlying technology in that particular CRM software which would be considered as a patentable software invention. So right here in this very example, we saw that there is a software which pretty much plain vanilla CRM is built out. That is not patentable because that uses conventional software technology and just puts up a flow which can be defined by a certain business process. So what is new over there is not the software stack that built the CRM platform, but what is new over there is that business flow. So since the novelty is in the business flow, that software cannot be patented. On the other hand, let's consider that it is still a typical business flow itself, but in an underlying technology, you have a unique way of natural language processing and providing contextual response still fitted into the same flow. And because the underlying innovation lies in technology, this software invention becomes patentable.